Now, on the panel before you, you see on my left I have Dimitri Sigos. He's the president of the European Confederation of Young Entrepreneurs. That's yes, right?
Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
He always says yes. And then on my further left we have Marina Calcagno Baldini. She's from Start Me Up, which is an incubator unit here based in Milan, and was working at the Lombardy Chamber of Commerce in Brussels. So you can see there is success after Brussels here on there. So welcome. These are two commentators. So they are going to sit and comment on now we're going to have 3 reports from the workshops. And so the first speaker is going to be Angelos Manglis. He's going to start in 1 second, but he will have to leave. So if you see him leaving the platform, it's not because he's fed up, but he has to get a taxi for the airport. And then we'll have, next speaker will be Dario Barbieri, and then we'll have Daria Radic. So those will be the 3 things. Now, I think there may be some backdrops, there may be some tag clouds, they may not. So we'll start with Mr. Manglis, and you've got 7 minutes, I think you said.
So, good evening, everybody. We had this session of access to finance, but we really spoke about support to finance. We need in Europe to create a common regulatory framework of tax incentives for business angels and other private individuals that we want to put their money to high-tech companies, to gazelles, to startups, and to venture capital funds. This is a very important policy measure. Also, we need more bankable proposals coming from entrepreneurs. Still, 1% of the proposal reaching business angels or venture capitals, they have investment readiness. So more programs are needed throughout Europe, cross-sectoral, in order to educate entrepreneurs concerning business plan readiness and entrepreneurial readiness. A lot of times the entrepreneur, they do not know what drag along means on a term sheet and several other issues. But we must go a little bit further and back towards our education system. As entrepreneurship is becoming more and more important in Europe these days, if we want to stay competitive, we need to put in our schools and in our universities entrepreneurial lessons. Because at the end of the day, the entrepreneurs are going to be the rock stars, and they must be open-minded, well-educated, risky, and have the necessary framework to do their thing, to try to create their business, to create growth, and to create jobs. The ecosystem is vital. What we have seen is having entrepreneurs outside of a special ecosystem is very difficult for them to succeed. So, clustering, EU policies, regional policies, even community policies at the level of a city can be very helpful for entrepreneurs to succeed. The cultural and creative industries are an area that Europe can succeed, that Europe can be very competitive towards other regions globally. But again, in this field, we need to educate a lot of different people. The venture capital community, the banks, in order to understand how to evaluate, for example, the intangible asset of a creative firm, of a radio, of a gaming company, of a publishing company, even of, let's say, a fashion studio or a chain of restaurants. It's not easy. We also need a real EU common market. This is still an open issue concerning this. We have seen that in health sector, for example, the regulatory framework is different for country to country. So there are problems if you want to go abroad outside of your country. So we need a real common framework in every aspect of EU business. Also, we need cross-border co-investments to become much more popular in Europe. What we have seen is that every entrepreneur starting from whatever corner throughout Europe is looking in a pan-European market or in a global market, and still the venture capital or the business angel community is local. So this creates a few problems in helping these guys. We need to have a mechanism of more cross-border co-investments in order to have a real international team of investors helping an international startup company. In order for these two things to be compatible. Finally, and I'm going to close with this, what we have seen is that in these emerging industries, the great competitor of European Union is again the US. Is not, let's say, the tigers coming from Asia or China or Japan. It's again the US. And remember that the US has a greater, bigger, with a common regulatory framework market, and they have much more money to finance their startups. Usually 3 to 5 more money they are putting in their startups than we're putting as Europeans. So at the end of the day, what we have seen in several studies is that after 5 years, the American firms are 5 times bigger than the Europeans in the same field, and they buy the European firms. So we need more money to be put in the financial sector, and without, let's say, a lot of regulation, because what we have seen a lot of times that money that are being put by public ways in venture capital community, they bring along a lot of regulation, either regional, if there are regional sources, national boundaries, or other kind of regulation. So we need to get over of this regulation in order to create real flexible venture capital funds backed by public money. These were the things, the most important things that we have been talking about in the access to finance, which is support to finance session. Thank you. I have to leave, so I'm very sorry. Have a nice trip back home. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Yes, it was a very good session, the finance session. So thanks very much for an excellent summary, actually, of that session on there. We'll move to our next feedback, which is Dario Barbieri, and he was looking at the SME clusters session this afternoon.
Good afternoon, everybody. I follow the session about clustering and small and medium enterprises. And we have 4 cases. One from Germany, one from Austria, one from the Flanders, and one from France. And the issue of the session was about how to give incentives to the enterprises in order to foster the collaboration across various sectors. The main issues coming out from the debate was first that in all the cases presented a scheme of financial incentives to the enterprises. Actually, in all the cases were employing a voucher system, which was presented as an efficient instrument because, first of all, it's not bureaucratic instruments. The administrative costs are very low, and it's very flexible. In all the cases, the amount of money given to the enterprises was of approximately 5,000 euro, which can be considered not too high, but we have to consider that in many cases, without these financial incentives, these small entrepreneurs could not have delivered their emerging ideas. And this is the financial issue. The main idea is that we have to create a sort of public framework in which the enterprises could be fostered to produce and to make real the innovation they work on. This is fundamental in order to promote a cross-sectoral collaboration, because to generate ideas, the main point, the key driver is to share ideas and to collaborate. So it's not only the financial incentive, but we have to set a framework in which enterprises could meet and could exchange ideas, and basically they have to, one important concept was how to motivate the enterprises and how to generate trust in their work. The other point is how to generate spillover effects, positive spillover effects. And what came out was that we have to give incentives to put all the enterprises together and make them know each other, and to, when possible, also to support them in terms of management, but also of setting a market framework in which they can operate. So basically these are the main concepts. So just to summarize, first of all, to motivate enterprises, give them the financial possibility to make their ideas coming out from the experimentation to the market, and generate trust in the enterprises, and to make them to create the possibility for them to go on the market, having strong support from the public. Thank you.
Mr. Barbieri, thank you very much for that. And your tag cloud arrived. Well, it's gone now, but it was there, so on that level. So we go to our final speaker. It's Daria Radic. She's going to be talking about the internationalization seminar or workshop, but you'll be sitting here because your notes are in front of you. Right.
Oops, hello. It's working. So hello, I'm glad to have this opportunity to present you the results of the third panel session. I believe very important panel session where we discuss the best possible solution to and also all the other issues of the internationalization and the access to international markets, especially for the SMEs and those who are dealing with emerging industries. So we talk a lot about internationalization. Many speakers and also you who are in the audience stress the importance of internationalization. Just to repeat what Mr. Spara yesterday said, he said that the only way to survive on today's market is to innovate and to internationalize. And Mr. Barbatelli said yesterday that behind the emerging industries are SMEs, and they need a strong support for internationalization. But how to do this? This was the main question. How can we support SMEs to internationalize, to go international? What kind of support can be provided for the emergent industry, but I say also for all other industries? How can clusters facilitate really the access to international markets, and how can they assist SMEs SMEs and entrepreneurs to find their international partners? How can business support programs help to assess the potential of the enterprise to go international, and how can clusters and business support programs help emerging industries and entrepreneurs to overcome also legal and administrative barriers to internationalize? Where the main questions, these are the main questions that we want to address also in our panel session. And we started with the three presentations, with the presentations of three initiatives. First was the presentation of the Vinitech network project, which was presented by the Patrick Villermo from the Plastipolis innovation cluster. It is a group of, or consortium of companies. It's about 2,000 SMEs, 300 research centers, 8 clusters and universities that decided to go together to create a common strategy for the internationalization of their products and their business ideas. And he shared the experiences they have with the start of the project and how they start the project, how they implement the first activities. They are developing and testing a new strategy and already implementing some very interesting activities that I will present you a little bit later. Then Mr. Dominioni presented the services that the small and medium-sized enterprises can get from the Enterprise European Network, which is one of the largest networks in the European Union. He shows us that about 27,000 contacts and partner search are presented in their database. This is a huge amount of data, but still we need to find out if this is prepared if this is accessible also and really for the SMEs. And then the third presentation, that was the presentation of the project, also very interesting project, Feeding the Planet, which is a joint initiative of 3 European biotech and agri-food clusters, which set up a European world-class cluster able to generate joint strategies and partnerships at an international level with countries such as Brazil, Chile, India, and United States. So the presentations were very interesting, and they all show us mostly how they approach to the internationalization, because they are all mostly at the beginning, let's say, of the implementation of their projects. But still they give us a comprehensive overview, and what we can see from their presentation is that their approach to the improvement of the internationalization is almost the same. They all started with the analysis, with the mapping of the partners, of the companies, of the technologies, competences of the partners within their clusters and within their organizations, in order to find where they have advantages, where they have competences, and so on. This was their first activity. And the second activity, of course, it was analyze of the markets, of the international markets, where they want to go. And again, they analyze the partners, the possible lead partners in these countries. They try to identify the possible fields of cooperation with them. And in the third stage of their project, they are starting with the implementation of their activities. And the main activities they implemented all are, of course, matchmaking events, mission visits, organizing all kinds of events with the partners and among the partners from their clusters and to the countries where which are the targets of their activities. And what is the, let's say, the key word of all their activities, of all their task they did. The key is cooperation. Cooperation, I believe, is the main word. They also recognized some problems regarding this cooperation, because it is not difficult, it is not easy to develop a strategy, a common strategy for internationalization when you have, I don't know, 300 partners which will fit the, let's say, particular interest of the particular company. So it is, I'm sure that there were a lot of conflicts also among the partners and a lot of pressure on which direction and what should be the goals and the main activities of those strategies. But here I'm telling you that because they find a very good solution. Because they said, no, we can't work, we can't satisfy all the interests of our partners. We need to find those opportunities which are of common interest of all our partners. And I believe that this is a very important message also for all of you, which we will start to work on preparing a common strategies for, let's say, internationalization of your business. This is one of the messages I catch there. And the second is common, the word common. The word common, common strategy, creating common brand, creating common activities. These are the keywords that I believe that lead to the success of such an activities. And to the end, I believe and we assess that all those initiatives which are also supported by the European Commission are welcome. They are bringing already the first very concrete and very successful results. And of course, we all found out and we agree that we should support these activities. We should support such a project also in the future, maybe even more in a systematical way. And maybe this was also also in discussion, this was stressed out that maybe those initiatives should be more convenient and should be created in a way to attract also more directly also SMEs. I believe that because we find out that maybe SMEs are not so direct included in such initiatives, and this may not be good. But the assessment was we are in a good direction and we need to go forward, improving and learning from each other to get the best possible ways how to really internationalize our economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks very much for also a very optimistic and more positive viewpoint, which is good at the end of the second day. Now we're moving across to, I'd just like to say we get reactions from our two panelists. There should have, on the program, there should have been three, and I'd just like to make apologies for Roberto Albonetti, who is unable to attend. So just to make sure if you wondered where he was, he can't make it today. But who would like to start with comments then on... So you've got three areas. There was the clusters and SMEs, finance, really, and internationalization. So you can pick your...
Okay, I will start with finance because I think it plays a critical role. And before becoming very specific, and with a disclaimer that my colleagues call me criminally optimistic. So I'm very optimistic for Europe, and I'm very much... You can hardly find anyone more pro-European than me, but we have to admit our failure. Because in Europe, in this very important sector, unfortunately, it's not one of our best. Let me give very fast a couple of examples. Two of the recent developments, the last 30, 40 years, that really changed our lives have doubtlessly been the World Wide Web and the smartphones. I guess we all agree to that, right? So the World Wide Web was more or less, created in Switzerland, in CERN. While the smartphone revolution, I can see many of you have your smartphones and they're well done. I'm always tweeting when I'm in such events. A smartphone revolution could never happen without the GSM network, which, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was even funded by the EU when it was created. Quite unfortunately, the European economy has not really benefited the most out of those two amazing breakthroughs that happened in Europe. And we have to look back and see what went wrong. And I think that the main factor which went wrong is about financing of emerging industries. In the European Confederation of Young Entrepreneurs, we have a rather radical approach, which is the following. We must stop subsidies, not reduce. Stop completely subsidies because they have killed entrepreneurship. While in the same time, we must greatly increase financing to basic research in the universities, which should not be competitive. Because what we see happening in many countries, and I would really like to know more about Italy, is the following. You have some amazing research laboratories, professors who want to do basic research, but because they lack the grants for basic research, they enter the competitive Horizon 2020 or FP7 programs. And that way, we really destroy the system. So it's very simple. Remove subsidies from anything from applied research and replace them with very nice instruments like equity financing, soft loans, so money can return, so it's not lost money because a grant, most of the times, unfortunately, I'm coming from a country, Greece, which was really destroyed out of subsidies. Because companies tend, after a few years, to consider subsidies as revenue. And that's the case. And you can see many specialized companies in getting subsidies and are very good in this. But they do not really create any added value. So, increase financing to basic research and use sophisticated tools like soft loans and equity financing for supporting businesses in the emerging industry. So that would be my contribution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good. I wonder whether the audience will agree on that one, some of us here. But anyway, it's good to stimulate some ideas here. I mean, it would also create a lot of issues around Horizon 2020. But there was some interesting points. Also, I believe it's just sadly that the Nokia brand has just died this week. I think the name Nokia has just gone this week. Yeah. Yes. So, but that's where I disagree because Nokia was the big brand leader in smartphones. Was. That's okay. Okay. Anyway, we move on.